Today's video is fun and simple. We're doing Fizzbuzz. Now, you've probably done Fizzbuzz in at least one language, but, and you know the twist here because you've read the title of the video, have you ever done it in CSS? Might not be too practical, but it is fun. So let's take a look at how to do that in this video. It's going to be very simple here. I'm going to start by creating a simple index.html file. Let's create a style tag at the top. Let's create a body tag underneath that. Let's create a div. And I'm going to duplicate that and then just copy and paste it here a bunch of times. We're not going to give those divs any kind of class, any kind of attributes or anything at all. We're going to be able to Fizzbuzz these divs. Now, in case we're not all familiar with exactly what Fizzbuzz is, it's a pretty simple like interview style question. You're going to print out all of the numbers from 1 to X, in our case 500 we'll say. Okay, so print out all the numbers from 1 to 500. Every number that is a multiple of 3, we're going to replace with fizz. Any number that's a multiple of 5, we're going to replace with buzz. And then any number that is both a multiple of 3 and 5, or said another way, any number that's a multiple of 15, we're going to replace with fizzbuzz. Now we want to start by putting some content into these divs, and we can do that with the Css Content Property. Now maybe you've seen something like this where we could do div content whatever. Now this will actually not work as is because the content property is supposed to replace the node or the element that we're working with here. And we can't replace the div, but what we can do is replace the before or after really pseudo element of the div. So we could do div : before. This type of styling might be pretty common if you want to, for example, add a little icon in front of any anchor tags that link out of your website, or maybe put quotes around an actual quote element. So if we take a look at this in our browser, you can see we have a bunch of whatevers, and I'm just gonna bump up the font size here. You can see now that we have whatever 500 times. Okay, cool. So we know that we can actually get some content here, but how can we get incrementing numbers in our content? If we look at the helpful tooltips I have here, that are just pulling from MDN, notice that this works for a string value or, as it says, a counter. We can actually use this thing called a CSS Counter. Now, I didn't know about CSS counters before this exercise, but let me show you what I know. We're gonna need to add a style to the div itself. And this is where we're going to say counter increment. And we need to name a counter here. So let's call our counter Fizzbuzz. Now you can see the counter increment is all about manipulating the value of an existing counter. And basically it says every div instance that we see is going to increment the Fizzbuzz counter. Now to get the value of the counter at a particular div, we need to use the counter CSS function and we pass it the name of our counter. We can save this, and if we head back to the browser and refresh, you can see now we have the numbers 1 to 500 just listed out on the page. This feels like a good first step. We've printed out the numbers, but now we want to start replacing things. Like we want to replace 3 with fizz, 5 with buzz. How do we do that? Initially, you might think we have to try and manipulate this counter in some way. And I thought about that for a while, tried to play around with it, but really this counter, even though it is a number, it is just a string. And so there's not really a way to like mod it or do any kind of conditional behavior on it. CSS isn't quite that powerful, at least as far as I can tell. But there is another way that I think is a little more elegant and a little more declarative, and that is using some other pseudo selectors. So we're going to create another style here, and we're going to use the nth of type pseudo class. This basically allows us to match elements based on their position within a bunch of siblings. So we have a bunch of sibling divs that are all of the same type. We want to do something to the nth of those types. And the neat thing about this is we can kind of use a little bit of algebra here. So for example, we could say 2n to do every second element. Well, in our case, we want to do 3n. And what we want to do is replace the content with the word fizz. Now, of course, as we mentioned, we can't just do it to the div directly. We have to do it to our before pseudo element. So we can do nth of type and then before. And if I save that and head back to our browser and refresh, you can see now we're replacing 3 with fizz, 6 with fizz, 9 with fizz, all the way down to we're replacing 498 with fizz. That is pretty cool. I love this declarative approach where we don't actually have to like manage a loop. We're just saying every third number should be fizz. We can do the exact same thing for buzz. So I'll copy and paste this. Every fifth should be buzz. We've got 5 as buzz, 10 as buzz, all the way down to 500 as buzz. Now right now 15 is also buzz because it's divisible by 5. If we temporarily delete our buzz rule and refresh, you can see that 15 is fizz because it's also divisible by 3. So we're going to copy and paste this one more time. And this is actually a great showcase of the cascading nature of CSS, where we match first the 3s, then the 5s, and then the 15s, and they will overwrite previous rules. So we can do now Fizzbuzz, and if we replace that, now you can see we've got Fizzbuzz at 15 here. Do we have a Fizzbuzz near the bottom? Yeah, Fizzbuzz at 495. Cool, so that's it. It's incredibly simple to do Fizzbuzz in CSS. The declarative nature of the language kind of lends itself well to this type of problem, which I would not have expected before going into this exercise. I'm gonna leave a couple of links down below the like button where you can read more about the pseudo classes, pseudo elements, and the counter properties that we used in this exercise. If you want more of this type of content, feel free to subscribe, and thanks for watching.